Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us tonight for RiverSmart. Tonight we have Farmington River Watershed Association Education Manager Heather Geist and Park Watershed Director Mary Rickel Pelletier. So thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Heather.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Can you see my screen in full screen mode right now?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. That is fantastic news. So you are seeing a big, beautiful map of the Farmington River watershed right now. I am Heather Geist from the Farmington River watershed. Hi, Sunny. Nice to meet you. um, as you can see here, highlighted in blue, if you look at Bloomfield, the Farmington River watershed, I don't know if you can see my cursor circling, it's just a little bit of Bloomfield. But we still love Bloomfield, and we still are very, very interested in your water quality in Bloomfield. In what most of Bloomfield is the Park River watershed, which Mary's going to talk about later, and a little bit the Connecticut River watershed. All of our watersheds are connected through groundwater. So clean water here is still clean water there. We love clean water. That's what I'm here to talk about today. We have a program called RiverSmart that we do with several other organizations in the state. You can get to that program at riversmartct.org. It has plenty of free resources for how you can be RiverSmart at home and in your community. Basically, all of these practices are based around one of two things, either conserving clean drinking water because it is a very finite resource. It's a very small percentage of 1% of the water on Earth is actually drinkable. So we want to conserve that as much as possible. The other side of our RiverSmart program is reducing stormwater pollution, helping slow down that stormwater that comes off of our hot, polluted streets and parking lots, off of our sidewalks, off of our roofs, getting that stormwater into a place where it can infiltrate into the ground and filter naturally before going directly into our streams and rivers. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and jump in so that I don't take up this whole session. And we can talk with Mary about the Park watershed, which is in a lot of Bloomfield, or I guess a lot of Bloomfield is in the Park River watershed. So ways that you can be RiverSmart at home. First one, check your taps. Make sure they're not leaking. That's a really easy one because you can hear them dripping and they're bothering you. You can fix those taps usually very easily with a screw or two. Sometimes you don't need to even buy a new faucet. We have a beautiful resource called YouTube. It's been around for a little while where you can learn how to do just about anything and fix those leaky taps. Another one is looking for the WaterSense label on appliances that you buy. When it's time to buy a new washing machine or a new dishwasher, you can look for this label from the EPA. That's the Environmental Protection Agency, a national organization that certifies certain appliances to use less water and be more efficient. Another one is properly disposing of your medications. People don't think about this one as much. We often think if we flush it down the toilet, it's a safe way to dispose of it. No one's going to pull it out of the garbage and get hurt. And that is very true. However, our treatment plants that treat our water that comes out of our toilet are not equipped to deal with medication. They can't filter it out. It's staying in the water and going back into the rivers. So there are ways to dispose of medication properly. You can ask your local pharmacy. They know a lot of them are drop-offs or know of a drop-off location you can use. There are also programs you can find online by doing a quick Google search, say medication disposal. They'll send you a bag that you can mail back to them with your medication. A way you can be RiverSmart outside in the yard is next. Most of it is done here as far as RiverSmart. About 30% of the water that we use in our homes is actually in our landscaping overall as Americans. Not all of us, of course. A lot of us are apartment owners, which I mean, technically would mean that if you own property, you're using more than a third on your lawn to make up for all those apartment owners, right? A big easy one, if you have a septic tank, which I don't think anyone in Bloomfield does, make sure you check it and maintain it. This one is one people don't think of, using the car wash. We like to think, oh, if we're washing our car in the driveway, you know, that's nice. It doesn't use too much water because those car washes use a lot of water, right? Thing is, a lot of these car washes are actually designed to recycle that water. And whatever they can't recycle is getting sent to the treatment plant, and all of that phosphorus in that soap, all of those nutrients that can overload our river systems are going to get filtered out. If you wash your car in your driveway, that water goes down into your road, down the drain, in the catch basin, usually directly into a stream. Another thing you can do if you really, really, really like to wash your car at home, do it in the lawn. Put a tarp down, drive onto the tarp, wash your car. Everything can drain into the grass and filter naturally. You can also take your bucket and your nice soft scrubby to the car wash self-serve bay. You don't have to use their brush and scratch your paint, but you can use their drains and their water. Disposing of pet waste. We've gotten really good as a society about bagging up our doggy poop. We're working on throwing it out after we bag it up. That's a pretty important one that people sometimes forget. We want to make sure that those doggy poop bags get into the garbage. If you have to leave the poop, it's best left outside of the bag and away from where it can wash into a drain. Find a spot where you can bury it if you need to, or even just throw it like uphill in some leaves. If you have to do that, get a little scooper. Make a compost pile, but dispose of it properly. Please don't just leave it there. And especially, please don't just leave it there in the bag. A big thing that we are adding to our RiverSmart program is our smart salting practices. We have been finding through our research at FRWA that chloride is becoming persistent in our waterways. It comes from our road salts. We need it for public safety, but there are ways that we can be more efficient with our road salt and stay safe. Another one, the main one with these salts is a lot of the time we have a tendency when we're scattering salt on our sidewalks at home to just dump it, big piles. The thing is, the way that these salts are designed is that they need space. They start very slowly. As soon as they hit the ground and the snow, they start to turn that snow into liquid. It takes a little bit of time for them to turn it into liquid, but once they start, it spreads out and they can actually cover a lot of space. As you see, the grains on the right have a lot of space between them. That is the way you want your salt to go down for it to be the most effective. A pile of salt is actually not really going to do that much to melt the ice. Fertilizer use in your yard. If you got to use fertilizer, try and use an organic one. You're better off just mulch your own grass. Mulch it with the lawnmower, rake it around so that it can actually release those nutrients back into your soil, and you won't even need to buy fertilizer. You don't need it. What happens with this fertilizer is when it rains, all the excess fertilizers on people's lawns are going to wash right into your storm drains, right into the stream. And that is too many nutrients for the stream. In Rainbow Reservoir in Windsor, 3 out of the past 5 years, I believe, we've been seeing cyanobacteria blooms that are because there are too many nutrients in the water. Those blooms can actually be toxic. So all this fertilizer and stuff that washes into the water, it has an effect and it can cause bad things to happen. Another RiverSmart practice is just reducing the amount of turf that you have in your yard. Grass is really useful. Of course, we like to play on it. We like to put our lawn furniture and our fire pits on it. It's really nice, but where you don't need the grass, why mow it? Either let it grow wild or landscape and have a garden. That helps, first of all, encourage pollinators, which we love, and wildlife. Another thing that it does is it just helps water absorb more into the soil. It keeps that soil more aerated. It doesn't get as compact, so water just shoots off the top of it. All of these different kind of plants and their roots are going to absorb and filter out all this storm water before it gets into the streams. And the soil will also be able to do that a little bit better because of the plants. A way that you can, I'm just checking how I am on time, sorry. A way that you can do a lot of RiverSmart things at once in your yard is by just mowing your grass a little bit higher. That lets your roots get deeper into the soil. It allows them to do more nutrient transfer further down, which actually improves your soil quality as well. Mowing high, as I mentioned, you can leave those grass clippings when you leave it a little higher, and those will be a nice natural fertilizer. They'll just decompose right in place into the soil. That helps you absorb the water, and it helps you from your soil compacting and becoming devoid of nutrients. which is very, very important to keep your plants growing. Also, one I almost forgot, longer grass shades out weeds. Weeds don't grow as well in longer grass. I'm not talking leave it a foot long. I'm talking like 3.5, 4 inches of grass. You know, instead of this much high and tight is what I like to call it, lawn cutting, go on the higher setting on your lawnmower. You might have to go a little bit more often, but it won't take as much time when you do. Also, one thing that I didn't put on this slide, but that I want to point out, when you cut your grass short, it will take as many nutrients and as much energy as it can to grow that blade back as quickly as possible. If you cut less than 1/3 of the blade, it'll just kind of be okay with it. It'll keep growing, but it's not going to go into super grow mode like it does when you cut it short. So mow your lawns higher. Believe me, it's great. One more RiverSmart practices is just limiting paved areas. If you decide maybe, I'm not going to go back. I'm just going to talk about it and we'll get to this one. If you decide to redo the pavement in your driveway, perhaps consider a permeable pavement solution, or maybe just going gravel. That way there's less water that's sheeting off and running off into our streams once again. Also, we got to remember whenever we put asphalt down, it's full of oil. All that oil comes out too. Next RiverSmart practice is nurturing native plants. This one is overall environmentally smart. Our land conservancy people love native plants too. Native plants are the best possible food for our native pollinators. They are also the native composition of an ecosystem in general is designed in such a way that they help each other out underground through nutrient transfer, chemical transfer, things like that. So having these native plants, which are plants that just grow naturally in the environment, you can find them in your big box stores. They're usually very clearly labeled native. There's usually less of them than the rest. But if you try and buy those ones to put into your gardens and your landscaping, they have a certain symbiosis going on underground that is going to actually help your soil, once again, retain moisture. It's going to help it filter water as water comes through. Oh, look at that. I had a slide that tells all about these things. Also, pesticides and fertilizers. Native plants are usually adapted to be able to be resistant to the pests in the area where they grow. They also are adapted for the soil quality in the area where they grow. So they don't need chemical additives as much. They are good in the weather that we have because, once again, they grow here. They like it. Wildlife, I already mentioned that. They don't outcompete other plants because, once again, they learn to play nicely in the sandbox with all of their other native plants. They hold the soil in place, which is becoming more and more important as we are seeing bigger storms. Unfortunately, for the Pomperaug River watershed, further down in the state, they had huge erosion problems this summer with that big storm they had. Native plantings can help keep soil in place in that sort of flood event. These natives also restore the natural habitat. And as I mentioned, they help reduce runoff by allowing that water to infiltrate, and even just by the plant matter itself from dense vegetation can help slow the movement of water in a big storm event. Planting natural buffers. This goes along the lines of native. Whenever I say plant at this point, just assume I mean planting natives. A natural buffer is an area along the side of your river, or can be along the side of a road as well. That's kind of near a river. It's basically just a stretch of plants that are put there on purpose to stop water pollution and erosion. So usually they are along the stream bank. They will be often 10 to 25 feet along the stream bank of just dense plantings and grasses that help wildlife and keep that stream bank from flowing away in high water events. They keep the floodplain stable. Here we go. So this is a really nice long slide, which has lovely things from our RiverSmart website, but I don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm just going to let you guys read it because I already said some of it. Another one. Okay, so RiverSmart. back to the beginning here. Our RiverSmart resources are all right here on this website, riversmartct.org. Everything I just ran through really quickly is an abridged version of all the many, many, many different free resources that are on that website that will help you to have a greener landscape at home and in your community, and help you to reduce your stormwater output, reduce your pollution, and conserve drinking water. Thank you very much. Mary, I'm going to pass it right over to you.
You can hear me now. Good.
Yes,
Good.
yep.
So I'm Mary, Rickel Pelletier, and I'm one of the volunteer board members working on Park Watershed, but I also work with the North Central Conservation District and other area nonprofits like FRWA on different programs related to water quality in the Park River Regional Watershed and in the urban suburban watershed stewardship. So let's see, what we advance? What's moving? What's gonna advance this? Oh, down here. Okay, so just FRWA's the boundary of the Farmington Ridge is the western boundary of the Park River Regional Watershed. So here's the Metacomet Ridge, and then also its northern boundary. So the interesting thing about the Farmington River Watershed, which is a larger watershed, is it wraps around the Park River Regional Watershed, which you may not have noticed that, but what's interesting is that a lot of municipalities that don't normally identify with the Park River Regional Watershed are included in it, like a quarter of Farmington, small fragments of Avon, but pretty much all of West Hartford except maybe a few acres, and 74% of the land area of Bloomfield is in the drainage basin of the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan. But we do rely on our drinking water for the Farmington River Watershed. So we have to work really closely together. And in the end, we're all just part of the whole greater Connecticut River watershed. So that's an image of what that all looks like here. Here's the greater Connecticut River watershed that includes both the Farmington and the Park River Regional Watershed. And you can see here's the park. The Hartford is the red developed area here, and here's the Farmington River. It's so large you can actually see it. And then a map of the state shows you how the Farmington River wraps around and also stretches up into Massachusetts, and here's the smaller Park River Regional Watershed. So as you can see, the real difference between the Farmington River Watershed and the Park River Regional Watershed, besides size, is that the developed land area. And whereas the Farmington River Watershed, there's a lot of protections around the drinking watershed. It's been only relatively recently, actually within the 20th century, that there's been more effort to recognize that urban watersheds are not throwaway watersheds, then they're not sacrifice zones, and which sounds horrible, but there was a sort of assumption in the 20th century that there was some away, but that's really changing. So back when there was an away, there was a sense that we could pave everything, and that that there really was no nature within the Park River Regional Watershed, or especially within Hartford. However, what's interesting is even though the land use maps show these like almost no green space in Hartford. So planners and maybe, you know, deep staff might have thought that there was nothing natural in Hartford. The reality of it is that one of these tiny little specks actually matters quite a bit in people's neighborhood scales, because there's these tributaries that are flowing through Hartford neighborhoods, especially the North Branch of the Park River and also the South Branch of the Park River. But the South Branch is armored in much of its area, as is Trout Brook. However, Upper Trout Brook is not armored, and there's just a lot of beautiful land around these tiny tributaries of the Park River. So that's what got me interested. I live 5 minutes away from this particular scene, and I can stroll over there. I could go to Elizabeth Park. You know, so one of the great things about being in the city for me is to be close to nature, yet also close to the city as well. I'm an urbanist, and I'm trying to figure out this relationship between people and nature. And this past year has been a real, or actually it was 2022 was a real eureka year for me, because for many years I had been trying to figure out, like, why can't we just fix things like, you know, this floodplain parking lot that's owned by the state and turn it back into a beautiful, you know, landscape. Other communities might have done that in the past, that might have been more familiar with. As an urban designer, that's some precedence that's kind of normal. However, really it's these sort of changes in cultural values that have to happen. And, you know, the RiverSmart program is helping us see how the little things we do make a difference. So back in the day, the solution to pollution is dilution. The assumption was that we could pollute because there would be enough clean water to dilute it all, right? But now we know we've actually created too much trash, too much pollution. I mean, there's even too much space trash. So we can't, there's like space satellite trash out there orbiting the Earth. So now we're realizing leave no trace, right? So there are no sacrifice zones, there's no away. And also, you know, I think in Bloomfield, more actually, I'm thinking of West Hartford, is that prior to the Clean Water Act, which wasn't put into law until 1974, you know, there was a lot of construction on floodplains, often for parking lots, or there would be fill brought in and a building would be built there. Of course, that happened in Meriden, and recently a lot of those buildings were removed and they've created a floodable space, the town green, the Meriden Green. So, you know, replacing the fill and this damage done in the past of having filled wetlands, because nature can provide beneficial services, and the water is going to return to where it is. And that when we allow nature, especially the water, the hydrological cycle to function, then we can really benefit. We receive the co-benefits of nature, which some of which Heather spoke about. And nature is not only essential to healthy communities, but it's also, you know, it brings is not, well, in the 20th century there was a sense that we didn't necessarily need nature. We could have nature out there, we could go visit it every once in a while, that would be fine. But actually, we know neighborhood quality of life does depend upon a lot of co-benefits of nature. So once again, actually, I don't know if we went into this in great detail, but this is, can you see this whole map here? Because I've got everybody's picture up there. Okay, good. I'm going to close this out. But this is the North Branch of the Park River, and here you can see the Bloomfield town line here. This is actually the Gully Brook watershed in here, but then this piece up here is the Farmington watershed. And so again, 74% of the town of Bloomfield is in the watershed, but that area comprises of 68% of the drainage basin. West Hartford is 17.4% of the drainage basin, and then there's smaller percentages. Only 11% flows through Hartford. So those watersheds are Tumblebrook, or actually Tumble Down Brook. We see it differently on different maps. The Beeman Brook, Philly Brook, Wash Brook, and all of those three the watersheds of those three brooks converge and become the main stem, and only 11% of the main stem is within this flows through the city of Hartford. Actually, parts of it flow through West Hartford. And note, this is Cottage Grove Road here. So one way to think about the main stem of the North Branch of the Park River is it's just south of Cottage Grove Road, across from, like, there's a dairy, and there's a lot of doctors' offices along here. So that's, if you're wondering where it is and you're driving down, I should know these numbers, but what is it, 189? It's the road into Bloomfield and Hartford. It's the North Branch of the Park River. You're actually kind of paralleling it. One of the angles is because of that. So that's the sense of the watershed. So what does that have to do with RiverSmart? Well, when we look at the big picture of why does RiverSmart matter, we see how these small practices make a difference, that it's our accumulated impact on the earth, on the environment that surrounds us, that really makes a difference on, again, our own lives, our own health, the water in our bodies, and then on the community and the region, and of course our life on Earth. So once again, looking across, here's Hugh Tower. If you were on the Metacomet Ridge, Hugh Tower would be here, and you'd be looking across. So we actually can see across our watershed, and we're largely looking across the southern end of the North Branch. And of course, as we all know, the actual main stem of the Park River, the convergence of the North and the South Branch, is a buried conduit beneath I-84, and it lets out south of downtown. So again, this is what that looks like, and so but this is what development looks like on a land use map, and this is why all these small steps can matter, supporting pollinator pathways within your own yard, disconnecting your downspout, not washing your car in the street or the driveway where it might run off into the river and directly into the area stream. So those are things that you can do whether you're in Bloomfield or whether you're in Hartford as well, because I want to point out Bloomfield is aggressively developing. So this map was probably from 10, maybe even 20 years ago. And Bloomfield is of course, again, aggressively developing, especially their downtown. And so that's one reason why every little bit of nature does matter. So, and I think, as Heather said, when we wash our cars at home, whereas because car washes were known sort of sources of nitrogens from phosphorus from these soaps, EPA forced commercial car washes to recycle the water. And so however much you may like to wash the car yourself, this really does, unless you're capturing that or using a non-toxic soap and you're letting it filter into your yard, you're just sending it into a drain and into a stream. And it's the same with herbicides and fertilizers you may put on your yard. Basically anything on that you may put on a lawn will rapidly move to a stream. And so how does that work? Well, so this is the pavement in the water cycle, and in the Happy Green Valley, maybe the less developed areas of the Farmington River watershed, when it rains, here's our little cloud. When it rains, this river may rise, right? Here's this is, let's say, the flow rate, and the rain starts to rise. The rain hits it, and the river rises, and then over time it goes back, and it goes back probably the same distance as it was. So it maintains a kind of steady flow, which is important for temperature, and it's also important for aquatic life, right? But if you have a big box store like the whole Kopaka shopping area, and you have a rainstorm, it's been designed to go directly into a drain and then into the last remaining landscape that was set aside in which to receive the runoff from the parking lot. And so there will be this kind of flash flood in whatever little tributary there is. So this like fire hose surge into basically a ditch. And then that ditch sends a fire hose into another smaller stream. And then once that's all over with, the flow of water in those tiny little streams disappears and they dry up. So they're not able to sustain aquatic life like fish, because there's no infiltration of water into the soil that can then maintain or sustain water and coolness for those streams. So when you have what's called impervious surface, you have more runoff and it arrives faster. And what may or may not show up on this slide is it's hotter. On a hot summer day, this pavement is hot. And so whatever heat the precipitation may receive goes straight into the river as well, which is not good for fish, especially trout. So again, what Heather was talking about, like bacteria and suspended solids, dog poop, basically, heavy metals that like the rust that might come off of your car, trash if people dump cigarettes, smokes, pesticides, nutrients, heat, all of that goes into a drain. And there are catch basins that are designed to presumably do a little bit of filtration, but if they're not vacuumed out, those drains are really just designed to go straight into area streams. And that's why this stew of contaminants is non-point source pollution, the #1 water quality problem in the United States today. We've solved our point source pollution problems, but now we are the problem. We the public, not the big industry, although big industry hasn't gone away. So here's an example of kind of these channels that form beyond those drains that look so neat, that keep our feet dry when we walk across the parking lot, and we can drive on pavement that adequately drains on a rainy day if we need to go to the grocery store. Off to the side, there's a flood of water gushing through a forest and causing this kind of erosion. So one of the pieces of work that can be done is what's called a retrofit and that's of green infrastructure. So again, here's an example. I'm standing in this erosion channel. That's how deep it is, right? And at some point, this water is like gushing out of off the hillside, from a drain, and it hits some sediment that it can really cave, and it just carves it out. And this happens, throughout the watershed, throughout every place. So RiverSmart, it seems small scale, but it's a little bit like, just not picking up plastic, choosing something that, you know, that can be recycled when you shop. It's the small steps that can make a big difference. Carpooling, you know, all these small steps can make a big difference. So this is, we built these bioretention basins, and this is just help you understand what green infrastructure is. There's often amended soils. So this is, you're gonna see in the next slide, there's, at the end of these parking lots, we installed basically deep rain gardens or deep swales, and the swales look like they're shallow, but in fact, there's amended soils that can further receive the water. You know, this obviously is a construct. It's not, it's less affordable than pipes, but it's not free. And that's why we need to conserve land, but also be more river smart. So this is an example of those amended soils and the depth. This is the parking lots in the background. These are bioretention basins on the east side of the law school parking lots in Hartford. And this is what it looked like in 2015. And oh yeah, this is what, I don't know, that's in the background there. Let me see if I can, yeah, this was what it looked like a few years later. And then this is what it looked like last year. We were working to just do a little maintenance. What's amazing, I think, with anything that you do, allowing nature to come back and finding a place for it, one, there's still, you know, experimentation, but to see the birds that will come, it's true, you're improving water quality, but the joy of like seeing bees, which it sounds like, oh my God, bees, some people would be worried about that, but they're really just going after specific flowers, you know, butterflies. You realize the insects are coming for specific native plants. And once you give them the food that they need, they appear very politely, you know, take their nourishment and move on. And you have the opportunity to witness this and be river smart in the process. So obviously there's some bigger challenges that can't be addressed by small scale steps. And that's a lot of the work of Park Watershed, is kind of working on the whole riparian corridor and leveraging large scale solutions for how we deal with real big, what's called combined sewage overflows. That's an MDC outfall. So Park Watershed was established as a 501c3 for this urban outfall to kind of transform how we think of urban waters and how we steward urban waters. And our website, parkwatershed.org, has the update of the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan. And it would be great if you would go there. There's a survey about the North Branch, although you could say you're from Bloomfield, and what your interests are as well. So this is the current work, which is updating the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan. And we're working on pieces of it, including pieces of it in Bloomfield. The Bloomfield, of course, will mostly be making recommendations about conservation in Bloomfield, because the focus for this update is to make specific recommendations to improve and conserve the last landscapes in the 6-mile stretch that's within Hartford, because there's increasing development pressures. So you can, this is a hard to remember URL, but you can go to parkwatershed.org and you'll get the links. And so, you know, we have a team, and these kinds of engineering teams do work as sort of larger scale work, so that we have some photos of that. And we learn about, this is where we learned that, you know, what say, for instance, the Trap Rock Ridge Conservancy does, where they're conserving land at the top of the watershed and along the ridge lines. That's very helpful. But in urban areas where you have underserved population and you have a lot of damaged land, a lot of floodplain parking lots, when we can restore those landscapes, surprisingly, the water quality improves. So say, for instance, in this area here, which I think if you see the picture behind me, right? That photograph is taken from here inside this hairpin turn area where there's a really beautiful forest that's been conserved just because it was protected from the distance of the roads. But as we go downstream and upstream, wherever there are these outfalls that have been designed and permitted by municipalities that didn't seem to think it mattered, then there's clear water quality damages and also an inability for the public to appreciate the beauty that can be in their neighborhood. So we always, yeah, so there's the picture, this is here, but that other picture is there. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of watershed do we want, right? So in the land cover, this was in 2008 here, and this was the land cover, in a kind of very broad brush way. But at that time, Bloomfield had really planned to aggressively develop a lot of their land, and we're not really sure what their plan of conservation and development is planning for now. But the goal is to help municipalities, especially the planners who are kind of very transportation focused, to recognize that these riparian zones are really the key. These are the spinal systems of ecological and functional nature, right? So in the past, we have these large patches of saved land, like Elizabeth Park, of course, Bushnell Park over here. These were parcels given by the, often wealthy people, Charles Pond. And then there were parcels like set aside as these are the dry reservoirs that were to protect downstream communities from a major flood event, right? But now here we are, 21st century, we're also learning that if we can protect that riparian corridor because of those stream buffers, that riparian zone, it's not just the floodplain, it's also the steep slopes, then we will also protect water quality along with those RiverSmart practices. But at this time, none of these tributaries, you can see in Bloomfield, there's no protections. There's no formal protections on any of these. So a developer could come and make all some sorts of promises to, oh, we won't mess up the water quality, and everybody says, oh, yay, economic development. And then, what happens years later, we're not sure. It hasn't been good. So again, that's Elizabeth Park. This is Elizabeth Park here. And this is down here is actually Hartford Public High. In this image, Elizabeth Park is right there. So how am I doing on time? Whoops. All right, so this is our overall, that's that plan. We're working on it now. I think these are a few slides. This is University of Hartford claims to be, I think, in West Hartford. I'm not sure if that development got approved. There's a fair amount of land that is along Bloomfield Avenue, but again, I think this is on 189. I think this is in West Hartford as an opportunity to conserve land. I don't think I have a photo of it, but east of Kopaka Plaza, past the, I don't know if the chicken house or something, there's like, it's not, when I say hint, there's like a live chicken and goat place or something like that, east of Home Depot, east of Granby. And there's a no-name tributary back there that goes underground, just north of Burnham Street and north of Cronin Park. That tributary really needs to be conserved by the town of Bloomfield because it does impact the river. And there's a lot of, even though this is not a photograph of that, you can see these riparian zones are often completely forgotten because they're sort of wooded wetland. and they're not useful to build upon until finally some kind of, I think, unscrupulous developer just claims that they can fill it in and make a buck off of it. But you can see there's far more forest in this unprotected area than there is in Elizabeth Park. And moreover, in Elizabeth Park, people walk there all the time. And even though there's some kind of showcase wild areas where we do see a lot of great birds, these are the migration corridors. And when there's birds and trees and wildness in those areas, then we also really get procreation. So I'm going to go into that. So we've already said 74% of Bloomfield drains in the North Branch. So here's an example of like what happens along the North Branch is a tree can fall over. This is a big, like I think it's like a 5 foot wide tree, or at least it's 4 feet, right? I'm standing on it, and there's, it's been lying and decaying, but it's also full of organisms that birds like the northern flicker or woodpecker or the nuthatch will come and feed upon at all times of year. And mammals will often, when you leave these fallen trees, the cavities around and within and under them become places for hibernation of, like, of course, there's a bobcat population along the North Branch, which does keep our squirrel population at bay. So there's a lot of benefits to allowing there to be avian and mammal migration and I don't know, again, procreation, like have whole families and generations living, and having that be their primary habitat instead of it being like our, playscape, which is what has happened to most municipal parks, is that they've become a people playscape rather than a place to encounter nature. So it's just again, a view of a forest that you might not get, you might see that in a park, but in a city park, but it wouldn't be as extensive as this is along the riparian zones. This would be a wooded wetland. You can see the river in the background. And of course, this is where, birds can meet. And these standing snags are particularly important in a public park. If something like this were near a sidewalk, that would have to be cut down. But each one of those holes becomes a habitat for birds and mammals, and especially endangered birds that are that we think of as part of the identity of our state or of our culture. And but they're losing their habitat because we're constantly clearing them from places where they've become liability issues. And it's not that I'm against that, but we need to set aside places for this full life cycle. And I think the riparian corridor can be that way. So again, here's just a picture of that web of life, the steep slopes along along one side and then the floodplain along the other. This is the North Branch of the Park River, but this is also the Farmington River. It's just at a different scale. You tend to have a steep slope and floodplain. This will switch back and forth, and this is where the wildlife and aquatic species, the macroinvertebrates, the insects travel. It's actually a very beautiful, vibrant place, and it's not that you want to hang out there every day, but it's a reminder that of how the earth is, and so to have access to that for everyone throughout our municipal, throughout high and low density population areas is meaningful. Otherwise, we may have people who have no idea what what nature is. So here's all sorts of birds or insects that might be, you know, within these habitats because we're not mowing and blowing the grass and cutting down the trees. And of course, the insects are what birds eat. And here's just talking about that width and what that width can do for us. So in the Farmington Valley, there's the width of a buffer might be, you know, 300 feet if you're trying to get a certain wildlife habitat, like, I don't know, moose or something like that, right? But then say with flood control, maybe it's 200 feet. With sediment control, each of these bars shows a different length of what does a buffer give you in, you know, kind of a rule of thumb. And really the shortest, I mean, often, you know, zoning and planning will say, okay, 25 feet will give you a buffer of 25 feet, but really 50 feet is a basic buffer to stabilize banks and support the aquatic food web. So, and what I've tried to point out is what green infrastructure can do is it can fold that buffer so that maybe we get as much benefit as in the if we have a green infrastructure feature with those amended soils. So you saw that we dug down with the green infrastructure. So I like to think of that width as kind of being folded like a napkin because we've amended the soils. And so we capture the stormwater runoff from a parking lot. And so instead of just taking away any buffer, not having a napkin, basically, is you have it folded, right? And it goes down. So you're still infiltrating the water. You're still allowing there to be water availability for future use for the trees and whatever plant life there is. You're not like flash flood surging the water downstream and then not having any water left. So and then with respect to like leaving the forest in place, here's a forest that's probably a tree that's been, this is Asylum Avenue, just beyond the Asylum Avenue bridge. It's a very old tree. It's easily over 100 years old. And I want to show you, my doctor's office, which used to be at St. Francis, is now off of Cottage Grove Road. And when I parked there, you know, right now, this whole tree can support so many insects. Many of those insects you never see, right? But here is, you know, and the birds, of course, eat the insects. Oh, and they can nest and have families. But this is what is replacing, like, those trees. This is a Bartlett pear tree. I swear it's you know, I know this looks fake, but I actually measured the tree in the parking lot. And then I went back to the big tree that I'm so familiar with. And I measured it several times. And that is the comparison of this tiny little Bartlett pear tree that you know, they cut down large trees, build a parking lot, and then you get this Bartlett pear tree, which won't even last 50, maybe 75 years, not even, right? It will never, you know, imagine if you had a family and your family just kept growing in the same town. That's kind of like a tree and insects, right? That the town, all your family members stay in the same town. That's insects tend to do that. They all stay in the same tree. So size matters and age matters. And I know we're kind of need to close out here soon. But I want to just emphasize that, you know, the larger the area of nature, the greater the benefits. And that's part of the RiverSmart program, is because in a way, all of that accumulates somewhere, right? And we want our rivers overall to be healthy, because somewhere there's a drain and somewhere it's going to go to a river. So you want to ask yourself, are the rivers in your community do you want them to be a park river or a hog river? Do you want them to be healthy for future generations? or do you need some place to just throw away your junk? And I think starting to realize that there is no way is a RiverSmart decision. And you know, we can talk about that this was the hottest year on record, but let me just point out this was from 2014. So the past 20 years, past 10 years, we just keep breaking these records. So the hottest years on records are always the years preceding, right? So we are starting to run out of time, and these rivers are proving to be not only places for birds and butterflies, but they're also cooling areas. So the hottest summer temperatures are areas without trees. The coolest summer temperatures are areas where, like in this area in Richmond, Virginia, the study was done. The cooler parts of the city were along the James River where there were forests. And that's also borne out in a lot of research about parks or about cityscapes, that the parkland is where the temperature drops if you're within a city. And just a few more pieces of information. These synthetic turf fields are super problematic. We did surface temperatures at Trinity College in their new synthetic turf field. This is 122 degrees, the field, right? The grass field is 109. So the grass field is 20 degrees cooler under a tree, still not very far from this exposed synthetic turf field, a 40-degree temperature difference, almost a 35 or so degrees. I should be able to count, but I can't. But that really is it was shocking to me. But when we were out on the field doing these measurements, it was hot. It was a hot day. It was one of those super hot days. It was June 29th of 2021, and there was a high of 95 degrees. But again, the synthetic turf field, 122.9 degrees. It was 34 degrees hotter than underneath that shade oak tree. So those big shade oak trees, you may cut down and replace them with a tiny tree, but you won't get that large canopy in that shade very quickly. And then last but not least, the Muddy River the Muddy River and Emerald Necklace in Boston has shown us that these riparian corridors, we make them beautiful. They last for over 100 years. And why do we want to do that? It's because our population is increasing, and we live in the Anthropocene. We've built our world. We know in the past, 100 years ago, we built beautiful parks, and now we can do that again. That was the actual aspiration of the Park River Regional Watershed when they first built Bushnell Park, the first public park in the United States, paid for with public funds. So those small gestures, Bushnell is just a tiny little gem now compared to other parks. So we want to conserve that land along our rivers. And we want to be river smart in order to do that. And I'm going to stop there.